Okay, so I think we're going to get started. I see some people writing in the chat box where they're from. It really is good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Wherever you guys are joining us tonight, we thank you for joining the Nefesh B'Nefesh Lone Soldier Program for a very informative webinar, everything you have to know about the IDF. And again, just preface it before I start, there's a lot of topics that we're going to discuss tonight. And again, I'm with my colleague Sarah, who will be answering your questions throughout. And again, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Every single one of these topics I can talk about for at least an hour. I'm just going to highlight and touch upon the most important aspects when you're thinking about making Aliyah or joining the IDF. And then afterwards, we're going to leave our email address, and you can feel free to reach out to us with any further questions or concerns, and we'd be happy to set up a time to speak or a Zoom call or an email, whatever works best for you. So I think we're just going to jump right into it. Tonight, here are some of the topics we're going to be talking about. Again, I mentioned I can talk about each subject here for at least an hour. I only have an hour tonight, including questions. And we're just going to run through it, a little bit about the Lone Soldier Program, different IDF programs that exist that you can draft into. If you have a degree, maybe some relevant degrees that are very useful in the IDF. We'll talk about what is a lone soldier, who is a lone soldier. We'll talk about a very important subject called Age of Arrival, and this actually determines how long you're going to have to serve based on your marital status and at what age you came. We'll sum it up again, from the Aliyah to the draft, the entire timeline, so you understand the big picture of how this looks. Another very important topic, Michve Alon, we'll get into it. It's basically a Hebrew course. It's actually an IDF educational base. There's a lot of different courses for new immigrants or volunteers. And after, we'll touch upon a little bit about the Army structure, how it looks for combat units, non-combat units, and then again, we'll focus a little bit about lone soldier rights and benefits. So feel free, again, throughout, type the questions away if you want to wait to ask some of the questions at the end so I could cover them for everybody. But either way, I'm here with my colleague Sarah, and she will be going over everything. So who are we? What do we do? So to start off, Nefesh B'Nefesh was established in 2001 as an organization to facilitate Aliyah from North America and the UK. And so far, we've helped over 60,000 people make Aliyah. It's pretty incredible. And in 2012, with the help of the FIDF, Nefesh B'Nefesh and the FIDF established the Lone Soldier Program. A lot of these new immigrants that were making Aliyah with Nefesh B'Nefesh were of the draft age, anywhere from 16 to 25, and therefore they had questions and issues regarding their Army service. So unlike Nefesh B'Nefesh, which only focuses on demographics from the North America and the UK, the Lone Soldier Program is an international program. As you can see here, just some of the countries that people and lone soldiers are coming from. We help facilitate service over 3,000 lone soldiers from all over the world. We have a Russian-speaking department. We have a French-speaking department. We have a Spanish-speaking department. And we also have multiple English-speaking advisors. And that is a little bit about the Lone Soldier Program. It started in 2012, and we have facilitated pre-Army soldiers in active service and also soldiers who are getting out of the Army to acclimate into their civilian life in Israel. So a little bit about what we provide, and these are just a few of the many things. The first and foremost is we have a 24/7 support line. One of the most hardest things in the Army, there could be times in training where you don't have your phone ever, and you have it for, let's say, 40 minutes at night, and it's 10 at night, and nobody's in the office. But we said these are lone soldiers who are basically leaving their home, sacrificing everything, and if they have their phone at 10 o'clock at night only for 30 minutes, then we need to be able to assist them and be there for them. So we have a 24/7 support line, and it's something that we could help, let future lone soldiers know and current lone soldiers that we're always going to be there for them, even if it's an emergency, and we're happy to help in that sense. We offer a 2,500 shekel grant to all incoming lone soldier olim. So if you made Aliyah and you're going to be a lone soldier, we offer you a generous 2,500 shekel grant. This can be to pay for your first month's rent. This could be to pay for certain gear that you need to the Army before you're actually receiving a salary. So another one of the many services that we provide. We have an employee in Meitav. Meitav is the HR unit of the IDF. So every single person who drafts into the Army goes through this Meitav unit. One of the harder things for lone soldiers, wherever they come from around the world, usually Hebrew is not their first language. So when they want to go through assistance or they need some help from Meitav and they pick up the phone and there's an 18-year-old girl on the phone who doesn't speak any English, she might just hang up on this lone soldier because there's a complete language barrier. But we actually have an employee who's a civilian contractor who works for Nefesh B'Nefesh, but also sits in the Army in Meitav. And this is basically our source for all the information. When we need to provide a letter from a soldier to the Army, instead of calling up through the front door, we're always going through the back door and providing this service. We're always assisting in when there's new information, new laws that come up, anything that has to do with rights and benefits for lone soldiers, then we're really here to have this source. So we're not just calling the front desk, we're actually speaking to somebody in the back offices. We also provide an amazing backpack to all incoming lone soldiers, and of course, many different social events, anywhere from helping them with bureaucracy and getting their license in one day, or also, when they draft, we have a draft party for all incoming draftees. So we take over a bar and we have a little bit of a party to celebrate these future lone soldiers. So again, this is just a little bit, tip of the iceberg. We also have post-Army consultations. We also have the entire support of Nefesh B'Nefesh. We have an employment team. We have many different Aliyah advisors. So it's very important when lone soldiers are coming to the Army that they're aware of the Nefesh B'Nefesh FIDF Lone Soldier Program. Okay, here's again the 24/7 support line. We have a number from the USA. It's not really meant to be 24/7. The 24/7 is specifically meant for active service soldiers in emergency type situations. But otherwise, we're in the office from 9 to 5. So feel free to call us through that US number. And again, afterwards, if anybody has any questions or if they want me to just send the the PowerPoint slide, first of all, this is being recorded so you can view it later. But if you want us to send you the PowerPoint, feel free to send us an email. My colleague Sarah is going to be typing our email address and providing other information packets that you could reach us afterwards. Okay, so let's just jump into different IDF programs, okay? Religious tracks. At the end of the day, the IDF is a Jewish army. It is a kosher army. It is the ultimate respect of religious observance of all types of religion, whether you're Jewish, Christian, Druze, Muslim. So it's a very tolerant army, and it's a Jewish army. So there's kosher food on every single base, regardless, even if it's just a Druze base, there's always kosher food. With that being said, there are more religious options, such as Hesder, which is a track in the army that combines yeshiva learning. So it's basically a year and a half of yeshiva, a year and a half of the army, and then afterwards another year, a year plus, give or take, back in yeshiva. That's called Hesder, okay? Other tracks are what is called Netzach Yehuda, which are for religious people who they serve for 2 years in a combat role. And the last 8 months of their service is done in more of an educational format. So they could, some Israelis don't even have their high school degree, so they can finish that. Foreigners usually have their high school degree, so they start working on their college degree. That is part of the religious tracks of the army. But again, with that being said, the entire army is observant, the entire army is kosher, and it's the first Jewish army in 2,000 years, so it's pretty amazing. Another amazing program is Green Sabar. Okay, Green Sabar is an incredible program. They're a completely separate organization, the Nefesh B'Nefesh and the FIDF Lone Soldier Program. And what they do is they have a group of lone soldiers, and they move together to kibbutz, and they all live together, and they all go through this IDF process and Aliyah process together. And then afterwards, they all kind of draft at the same time. So there's a lot of pros and cons with Green Sabar. First, I just have to preface it. If anybody is seriously considering thinking about going to Green Sabar, I highly urge you to just go on their website, reach out to them. And in any way, in order to get accepted to Green Sabar, there's a lot of seminars that take place even before you move to Israel to try and build that bond between all of the Green Sabar participants. And again, there's a lot of pros and cons. The pros are you live on a kibbutz, you're with other lone soldiers, you get an adopted family, and you're really with this bond. Some of the cons are you might be limited on where you're allowed to actually serve. You actually have to sign a 1-year contract, so you're on that kibbutz no matter what. Even if you leave, you still have to pay them. But again, if anybody's seriously thinking about Green Sabar, I highly urge you, reach out to them. They have representatives in North America, in Europe, also in Israel as well, okay? Atudat Olim. So a lot of people, they want to make Aliyah, they want to live in Israel, but they also want to pursue a degree. So the army allows people to move to Israel and make Aliyah, and then defer their IDF service and go to school first. The only main stipulation is that they have to start their degree within 18 months of arriving in Israel. Okay, so not 18 months from their Aliyah. So if somebody comes, let's say, for example, for a gap year program, and then a year later they want to start school, they've already passed their 18-month window, and therefore they wouldn't even be eligible to defer their service. But if somebody comes and starts a degree within 18 months of arriving, then they could defer their IDF service. If they have studied something, very useful, for example, here are some of the relevant degrees in the IDF. If they study any of these subjects, then the IDF can make them sign on for more time afterwards, because the deal is, hey, we're letting you push off your IDF service, so you're going to owe us a kind of year or two where we can utilize you and your new skill sets, okay? If you study something like history or philosophy, which are both amazing degrees, it might not be as relevant for an IDF service, and therefore you would go do your degree, and afterwards you would just complete your IDF service, okay? So that's just a little bit about the program Atudat Olim. Akademizacja. Okay, this is another program within the IDF for people who actually have already completed their undergrad degree or their master's, and then they're coming to Israel and they say, hey, listen, I'm 23, I'm 24, 25, I have all these amazing skill sets, I want to utilize my degree. And then the Army will work on trying to find them a position that is relevant and useful to their degree. The truth is, at the end of the day, it's the IDF, it's a conscription-based military. The number one goal of the Army is to keep the citizens of Israel safe. It's not to cater towards lone soldiers. It's not to make everybody happy. It's one goal: to keep Israelis safe. With that being said, they like to kind of help, lone soldiers find positions that are relevant for them. They don't want a bunch of disgruntled soldiers just walking around base upset. So even if you have an amazing degree in computer science and you want to do a specific job in intelligence, it does not guarantee that you will actually receive that job, but you definitely have a better chance than somebody who doesn't have a degree. And then the last option, one of the many programs that exist, is Machal. Okay, Machal stands for Mitnadev Lechutz Laaretz, and it stands for foreign volunteers in the Army. So Machal, they do not make Aliyah. They come to Israel and they have an expedited draft process. The entire process only takes 120 days, and they serve for 18 months. They're not citizens. Okay, they don't have many of the rights that a regular Israeli citizen would receive, but they're able to do their 18-month service, specifically in combat or combat support positions. And afterwards, they're no strings attached. They're not Israeli. They don't have to stay in Israel. They can go back to their country of origin, but it's an amazing way for, some people to kind of get a feel. Sometimes you don't want to just jump into a 32-month service requirement. It's easier to kind of, ease into it with an 18-month service, see if you even like it. It's very difficult. But this is an opportunity for people to come, serve in the Army, and experience it. Again, once you're in the green uniform, nobody cares if you're a lone soldier, if you were in green Sabar, if you were an Atudat Olim. A soldier is a soldier, whether they're from India, whether they're from Canada, whether they're from South America, Russia, etc. Okay, but if you want to know more about Machal, the one thing I just have to add is they draft 3 times a year, in April, in August, and December. Okay, and the only way it works is that they only work draft by draft. So they obviously have some eligibility requirements. You could only do it up until the age of 23. It's only for combat or combat support units. And again, if you have any more questions, we're going to leave our email addresses, and feel free to reach out so we can discuss this matter further. But these are just a few of the different tracks that people go in order to actually serve in the IDF. As we spoke about some relevant degrees, again, I have a lot of times people call me, they say, I have a history degree, can I use it in the IDF? Unfortunately, there's not really such use for it, and they'd rather you be in a combat unit or combat support or something like that. But as you see here, any technical degree, any type of engineering degree, these are all very useful, relevant degrees that the IDF is always looking for, especially from foreigners. Excuse me. Okay, so who is a lone soldier? Right, we hear this term often. The technical definition of a lone soldier is anybody who does not have their parents who live in Israel while they're in the Army. Okay, just to be even more technical, there are 2 types of lone soldiers. There are foreign lone soldiers, and these are lone soldiers that come from all over the world, and obviously their parents live abroad. There's around 3,500 of them in the Army. And then there's another class of lone soldiers, which is Israelis who, for whatever reason, come from disenfranchised homes. Sometimes they come from ultra-Orthodox houses that throw them out the second they decide to draft. Sometimes they come from broken homes. Whatever it may be, they're also considered lone soldiers. But tonight, again, Nefesh B'Nefesh, the FIDF, what we like to focus on are foreign lone soldiers. And the way they determine this is that when you draft into the Army, they look at your parents' passports, and they want to make sure that your parents were not in Israel for more than 6 months leading up to your draft. So if your parents go on a sabbatical, all of a sudden you want to go to the army, and they say, hey, your parents have been here for the last year, regardless if they made Aliyah, you would not be considered a lone soldier because they're going to assume that your parents live in Israel. They do a check at the beginning of your service, and they do a check halfway through your service. Okay, so the next one is, okay, I moved to Israel, I went to the army, and now my parents decided to follow me, and they also want to make Aliyah. So if your parents make Aliyah, you have to inform the army, because all of a sudden, you will no longer be considered a lone soldier. But you have a 90-day grace period. So it's not like the day your parents land, you instantly lose all of your lone soldier rights and benefits. But you do have a 90-day grace period. But again, we always tell everybody that by law, they have to tell the army if their parents made Aliyah, because this will, make sure that they have the appropriate rights and benefits. Okay, so that's just the technicalities. What is a lone soldier? Okay, this is now a very, very important chart, because this chart determines who can serve in the army, how long you will have to serve in the army, and why. Okay, so the most important term here is age of arrival. If somebody comes to Israel at the age of 18 and they don't make Aliyah, they're on a gap year type program. Next thing you know, they fall in love, they want to go to school here, they go to our IDC or Bar Ilan. Next thing you know, they're 23 years old. They look on our website, they see this chart, and it says 22 to 27, single male, has a volunteer service. But what the Army does is they go back to your initial age of arrival. And age of arrival is any time spent in Israel for more than 120 days in a 12-month period. So the second you come to Israel and you spend more than 120 days, your age is officially set. And you can stay in Israel for another 6 years. And the day you make Aliyah, the IDF is going to look at you as the day you came, the day you set your age of arrival. Okay, this is very important. For example, I came to Israel when I was 18 years old. I went on a gap year program. I thought I was going to stay in Israel and join the army. For whatever reason, I decided to move back to America to pursue a degree at the University of Colorado in operations management. But technically, my age of arrival was 18. Okay, and then in order to reset your age of arrival, you have to leave the country for 2 years. So I came to Israel as an 18-year-old. I spent a year. I now left for over 2 years. I came back as a 23-year-old, and therefore I had a volunteer service. I still decided to draft into the army. I served for 2 years in a combat unit, which is Kfir, the Kfir Brigade. It was established in 2005 specifically to focus on operations in Judea and Samaria. It's currently now the biggest brigade in the IDF. It was an amazing experience, filled with ups and downs, really getting a deeper understanding of what's actually happening in Israel after growing up and being raised as a Zionist. So it was an amazing experience. It had its own challenges of drafting a little bit older, but all in all, the point of that story is that I had an age of arrival. I left for 2 years. I reset my age of arrival, and when I came back, I had a new age of arrival. But this is very important because I have a lot of times people call me and they say, hey, I'm 24 years old. I don't think I have to serve. And I always have to ask them, when did you set your age of arrival? Okay, so this is very important. As you see, it's different for females. It's different for married men. It's different for married men with children. But the most important part here is that the army does not view you at the age you make Aliyah. It views you at the age of arrival, when you came to Israel and spent more than 120 days in the country, okay? Again, we've had a lot of questions even before this webinar started. Hey, I'm 28, I'm 29, 30, 31. Can I serve in the army? Unfortunately, the IDF is very, very strict with this policy. Okay, so if you're over 28 and you don't have an age of arrival earlier, you will not be able to join the army. Okay, it's actually an amazing thing. The IDF has a surplus in manpower. So it used to be that the service requirement for all Israelis was 3 years, but because of this surplus in manpower, they actually cut it down to 32 months. And it's a great sign. It shows Israel and the world that Israel has plenty of people to draft into the army. And even though Americans or Canadians or South Americans, wherever they come in the world, and they're 32 and they want to draft, the army will just say, thanks, but no thanks. It's not personal. It's just how the army works. And it's a very strict policy. We have seen in the past certain exceptions. Okay, the exception is never the rule. We've seen certain exceptions of the IDF allowing people who are a little bit older than 28 draft into the Army. Unfortunately, even with all of our connections, we can't help. The few people who I've seen and I've actually, talked to many times who have done it, they've slept outside the recruitment center for weeks on end. They've petitioned to all the major newspapers in Israel. The process took them over a year and a half just to get an interview. So I don't want to ever say it's impossible, but know that 28 is the cutoff for the IDF. They will not accept you. I've even had people who are 26, 25 being rejected. But with that being said, everything in the IDF is a case-by-case basis. So you can never say, but my cousin, my friend, my whatever it may be, every situation in the IDF is a case-by-case basis. Okay, so this is a very important chart. This is on our website. It has to do all about IDF and the age of arrival. Okay, so a general process of how it works is usually, again, we're now talking about the general aliyah process. For Machal, it's different. The entire arrival to placement takes 120 days, but for a regular new immigrant, the process is a lot longer. So when you arrive to Israel, all new Olim are given what is called a Shnat Histaglut, a year of acclimation, which means by law, the IDF is not legally allowed to call any new, any new immigrants to the Army. Okay, this year is meant to acclimate, to learn the language, to get settled, to meet some friends, to kind of find yourself in Israel, how it works, how to get around with the buses. And then around 11 or 12 months after your aliyah, the IDF will call you for your Tzav Rishon. Okay, your Tzav Rishon is your first intake that the Army sees you. You do your Hebrew test, you do a physical profile, psychiatric evaluation, IQ test, a lot of different interviews. For Israelis, this takes place in high school, but obviously for new immigrants, they didn't go to high school in Israel, so they're doing it once they make aliyah. A lot of times people reach out to us and they say, I don't want to wait 12 months. I've waited my whole life. I'm 23, I'm 24. I want to start the process ASAP. Okay, so first off, there's no such thing as ASAP in the Army. Everything moves a little bit slower. It's just how it is in Israel in general. But if you reach out to us, we can help waive your year of acclimation and start the process immediately. So from the day you start the process until you're in the Army, it could take 6 to 8 months, depending on a variety of factors, your Hebrew score, different interviews, whatever it may be, but the general process is 6 to 8 months. If you don't waive your year of acclimation, then it'll take a year and 6 months or a year and 8 months. So we always tell people that if they want to draft around 6 to 8 months before their ideal draft date, reach out to us, you fill out a form, we send it to the Army, and the ball starts to roll. Okay, after your Tzav Rishon, which again, I don't want to get too into because we know this is just a general IDF info session. We have a lot more information on our website regarding the Tzav Rishon, what takes place, which evaluations, et cetera, et cetera. But after you do your Tzav Rishon, you get put into a general draft pool. And depending on the variety of factors, for example, there's a Hebrew score, a Hebrew test at every Tzav Rishon. It's up to 1 to 9. If you don't get a 7 or above, which is very difficult for new immigrants, then you have to go to a mandatory Hebrew course. And this Hebrew course only takes place 3 times a year, in April, August, and December. And these drafts fill up rather quickly. So I have people now who started the process a few months ago, and they're being pushed to the December draft. So if you make aliyah, let's say in August or September, realistically, the December draft is already full. And then you're only going to be able to draft in, let's say, April, maybe August. So I always tell people they have to plan ahead. They have to think at least 6 to 8 months in advance, and then to kind of, work out when they kind of want to draft. In between the Tzav Rishon and their draft date, they might go through certain interviews if they have specific jobs that they want to go to. For example, the IDF spokesperson's unit, it's a very sought after position, and it requires a lot of different interviews. And that takes place in between your Tzav Rishon, and then you get a draft date. Once you get a draft date, you're pretty much good to go. But that draft date can only be for 3 months down the road. So this is why I said it's a long process. Don't wait till the last minute and say, hey, I want to draft in 3 months, because nobody will be able to help you in that situation. Then you have your draft placement and you go to your unit where you end up, okay? So here are the general drafts. The combat drafts are March, August, and November. But again, as we mentioned, there's a Hebrew course that takes place. And if you don't pass the Hebrew test, which most new immigrants do not pass, then you have to draft into one of these drafts, either in April, August, or December. Okay, as you can see, all of these Hebrew course drafts line up with the combat draft. So the December draft goes into the March draft, the April into August, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so and if you're in a non-combat position, then there are drafts throughout the entire year. There's literally a draft every single week for different positions, different jobs, different circumstances. Okay, but these are the general drafts. Most new immigrants fall into this Michve Alon category. Some people who have fluent Hebrew, they can just draft directly into a combat unit or combat support or home front command. Okay, at the Tzav Rishon, you will be focusing on your Hebrew. That's a huge thing. So people always ask, what can I do now? Because unfortunately, until you're actually in Israel, you cannot start the IDF process whatsoever. And the only thing you can do is work on your Hebrew. And as good as your Hebrew is, that's as far as you're going to go in the Army. Okay, and a lot of times I remember when I was in the Army, there was a soldier. He really wanted to be a commander. He was an amazing soldier, but his Hebrew was terrible. So even though they loved him and they wanted to help him out, he was not able to go to commander's course because his Hebrew wasn't good enough. Also, people say, hey, I want to expedite the process. I want to draft as soon as I can. If your Hebrew is not good enough, you're going to have to go to one of these Hebrew course drafts, and therefore it's just going to extend the process even further. Okay. Another part of the Tzav Rishon is physical. So you get your physical profile. You have to fill out a health declaration form. Again, if you have any real medical issues, then you always go for further evaluations. But some people who have no issues, they have a perfect score. They finish their health profile physical in one day, and they move on with the process. The next one is the psychotechny, which is basically an IQ test. People always ask me, how can I study? That's the whole point. You can. It's just an IQ test. And then another interviews. There's interviews with commanders, with officers. They want to know who you are. Why are you, leaving your country of origin to go draft in a foreign military? They want to kind of vet you, see if you're stable, and see if you're even fit to serve in the IDF. So those are some of the components of the Tzav Rishon. As we mentioned, if you don't pass your Hebrew score, you have to go to Michve Alon, okay? So Michve Alon is often sometimes confused with a Hebrew course, but really Michve Alon is just the name of a base. As you can see here on the map, it's located in the north of Israel with beautiful views. But at this Michve Alon base, there's a lot of different courses. Okay, one of the main courses that we usually talk about is the Hebrew course. It's called Course Ivrit and Michve Alon. Okay, again, it takes place April, August, and December, and you're basically joined in a unit of all immigrants from all over the world. Sometimes I think last year they had soldiers from over 45 different countries in a unit of, let's say, 350 people. So it's very diverse, okay? And the goal of them is, one, to create a social bond. Israelis don't go to college after high school. They go directly into the Army, and this is their first experience, their first major, social exposure. Okay, also in the Army, a lot of times you have English speakers or Russian speakers, and they're very cliquey, but part of Michve Alon is to break all of these cultural barriers, as we can see, and to, form into one unit and one Israeli people. And that's why the Army, Israel is very much a melting pot, but at the same point, they all go through the Army, and everybody just comes out Israeli. So that's the main goal of Michve Alon. Of course, Hebrew, the first month of Michve Alon is basic training, the most basic of trainings in the IDF, which is called 02. It's only a 4-week training just to make sure that every single person in the IDF has to go through this training. Some people afterwards might never, that's as much training as they'll ever need. But if you go to a combat unit, then you're going to have to do the whole thing again, and your training will be at least 7 months. Okay, so the first month in Michve Alon is just to get everybody, transitioned into the IDF, how to fire a rifle, understand IDF discipline, and then the next 2 months are Hebrew classes. Okay, so from when you get to finish your Tzav Rishon until you're in Michve Alon, you're going to do a Hebrew test at the beginning of the course, and you want to do as good as you can, because you do not want to end up in a Hebrew class with maybe, let's say, a Ukrainian who's never spoken Hebrew in his life, and you went to a Jewish day school. So you want to do as good as you can on your Hebrew score at the beginning. So as we mentioned, Michve Alon is 3 months. The first month is basic training, and the next 2 months is Hebrew classes. Again, it's 8 hours a day. You're in uniform. There's no goofing around. It's not like school where you get kicked out of class. This is the military. It's IDF discipline. It's very serious. If people miss class or don't, you're going to have to stay on base for Shabbat, or you have to get court-martialed. So it's very important. But the idea that it's so stressed is because this is an Israeli army, okay? Nobody's going to speak English. Nobody's going to speak Spanish, Russian, French. It's only Hebrew, and it's sink or swim, okay? And if people don't do well in Michve Alon, we have actually seen people get held back, and they have to do Michve Alon all over again, okay? This rarely happens, but it does happen. This is why we tell people that they need to take it as serious as possible, okay? There's no homework or extra study, but we always tell people, be committed, ask for any extra help. If you find yourself bored, ask for more work. And again, it's a very soft transition into the army because you're not just thrown into the thick of it. You're with other Olim, and they understand that you guys have these challenges with the Hebrew, and they'll work on it together, okay? So another course that takes place at Michve Alon that's also for new immigrants. These are specifically for new immigrants that pass the Hebrew course, but for whatever reason, they're still a new immigrant, and they draft to a course called Course Moledet. It's basically like crash course in Zionism, Jewish history. It's around a 3 to 5 week course. Also, it's an amazing, transition into the army. And I just forgot to mention the most important part about going to Michve Alon is at the end of the course, you have the opportunity to meet with a Katzin Miyun, which is a placement officer. Okay, and a lot of times Israelis, native Israelis, they don't know where they're drafting. They get onto that bus at the recruitment center and they have no idea where they're going. But when you go to Michve Alon, you have the opportunity to meet with a placement officer, and he has the power to decide where you're going to end up. So you have a conversation instead of just saying, okay, David's going to be going to this unit. You have a conversation where you want to go. I always tell people, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. Because at the end of the day, there's no guarantees with job placement, and the Army will place you where they see fit. That's very important to go into it. Again, we're not talking about summer camp or an internship. This is an active military in an active war zone. And at the end of the day, the IDF's needs are always the most important. That's a little bit about Course Moledet. So now we're going to look a little bit about the IDF structure. When you go into a combat unit, first you have to go through basic training, which is not like the basic training at Michve Alon. This is combat basic training. It's around 3.5 months, very intense, very little sleep, a lot of hard work. But again, if you have the right mind and you have the right passion for it, then, very doable, okay? The next stage is called Imun Mitkadem, which is advanced training. And this is another 3.5 months. So total, it's around 7 to 8 months, okay? Basic training is way more about IDF discipline, learning about the weapons, learning about the general IDF, how it works. And advanced training is a lot more of, you could be in the field for 2 weeks, war week, a lot of different simulations. And that is the general training. If you go to an elite reconnaissance unit, then after your advanced training, after your 7th or 8th month, you go to a whole other 7 months reconnaissance training. Okay, this is very intense, very selective, very difficult to get into, but we see a lot of Olim and lone soldiers achieve these units, which is very incredible. But this is a general combat. So I'm talking about Tzanchanim, the paratroopers, Kfir, Nachal, Givati, Golani, Palchatz, Totchanim, Shirion, all the different combat units that exist. This is how it looks. This is how your time works, okay? After your 7 to 8 months of training, you go into the Maslul. So the Maslul, it could be translated as live training, but really you're in your active duty, but you're still kind of the newbies. You're the new guys on the base, so you're not given the most intense jobs just yet, but you're still working your way, and I would consider training on the job another 4 months. And then after you're considered, operational status, you're ready to go, whatever your job is on wherever you're placed throughout the country, you are completely, you have full operational status. And then afterwards, throughout the Army, there's a lot of different courses that people can go to. For example, I was able to go to an extra Hebrew course just to try and beef up my Hebrew. It was a 3-week course. There's civilian type courses to get you ready for your release. There's a lot of different courses. There's a conversion course in the Army. So these are after you finish your entire process, and that makes up your 2-year or 2 years and 8 months service, okay? Non-combat's a little bit different. First off, they want to check your security clearance, okay? So for example, I hear a lot of people, they want to go to Modi'in, they want to go to intelligence, okay? So first of all, the security clearance for intelligence for non-Israelis are almost impossible. You would have to be living in Israel for at least 3 years. You would have to have a completely perfect record. and they would have to trust that you're able to. And even with all those, eligibility, you still might not be eligible for intelligence because it's a very difficult unit. And there's different levels of security clearance for different types of units. But either way, while you're in a non-combat world and you're looking for a non-combat position, you go through the security clearance. Also, again, Sarah, my colleague, she's going to send you a list. We have a PDF. We translated the IDF job booklet. It's around 75 pages. So Sarah's going to send that in the chat box, or we can feel free to email us. It's also on our website. And you can look at the different combat or non-combat positions, okay? So afterwards, you go through Tirnut. Again, Tirnut for non-combat is a lot shorter. They're not expected to have fully, 7-month training. Their training could be 1 month, it could be 2 months. It really just depends. And then afterwards, depending on their job, they go to certain courses. Okay, so certain courses could be a 6-month course, how to learn their job. For example, if you want to be a shooting instructor, I think that course is around 4 to 6 months. Other jobs, the course could be 8 months. Other jobs, the course could be 2 months. It really just depends on what course and what capacity, okay? Afterwards, they go through their service. And then the last thing is a closed versus an open base. So the main thing here is a closed base is when you go to the base and you do not leave every night. You go to the base and you can be there for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. An open base is basically just a regular day job in the IDF. You show up to your job at 8 a.m., you leave at 6 p.m. People are coming and going, and that's why it's considered an open base. Just a word for the wise here, if you want to go to Green Sabar, you cannot be on an open base because they're not there to facilitate somebody going back and forth from the kibbutz every single day. They're looking more for people who are home on the weekends. Okay, so that's just also important to understand the difference between a closed and an open base. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about some rights and benefits. Again, Sarah, my colleague, is going to send you afterwards, or just feel free to email us. And you can email us basically all, hey, can I get that rights and benefits package? It's actually on our website as well. And you can see the entire rights and benefits. I'm just going to touch on a few subjects that are very relevant, okay? All lone soldiers are given a 30-day vacation abroad to visit their country of origin, not just to go, travel in Thailand. If you live in Canada, you have to go back to Canada. If you live in France, you have to go back to France. The Army understands that Israelis get to see their family, once a month, twice a month, even more. And lone soldiers can go a year, 2 years without seeing their family. So once a year, a lone soldier is given 30 days to visit abroad, okay? Again, this is not just something you tell your commander 2 weeks in advance, hey, I want to go on a 30-day vacation, is that okay? These are things that you have to take care of months in advance, okay? Once throughout your entire service, the Army will pay for your flight home. Okay, so let's say you're serving for 2 years and 8 months, you're going to get 3 30-day vacations. They're called a Miuchedet, which is basically means a special vacation. And once throughout your service, the Army will pay for your flight. This is only done in your second year. So if you want to fly for 30 days in your first year, that's on your own dime. In your second year, the Army will, cover it. So that's very important. The other one are parents' visits. When parents come to visit their children in the IDF, the Army has to give a soldier 8 days a year to be with their parents. But this 8 days, there's some fine print. It's 4 days in the first 6 months, 4 days in the second 6 months of the year. So a parent, and again, at the end of the day, I have to preface it. There might be times, I remember when my parents came to visit me, there was a situation around Jenin, and I couldn't leave the base, and I was stuck on base. And my mom and dad would call me. Eventually, I got to see them. I was lucky, but at the end of the day, just because a parent comes to Israel doesn't guarantee that their kids will come off. There could be, God forbid, an operation. They could be needed for whatever reason. They could be in a very intense part of training. This is why we always tell parents to reach out to us, because there are certain times of an Army service that are good to come, and then there are certain times that are not, not the best. The email address at the end of I'm going to show you, so don't worry about that. With that being said, as long as a soldier is a good soldier, they give their commanders enough time to kind of, take care of everything. There should be no issues. And this is, again, why we come in at the Lone Soldier Program, because we're their advocates. Sometimes a soldier doesn't have enough time to speak to their commander, speak to his officers. Sometimes he doesn't have the good enough Hebrew to do that. So they call us, and we become their advocates. We're able to assist. I call commanders all the time to just try and give them a better understanding of what it means to be a lone soldier. Tomorrow, I'm actually traveling to the Nachal training base to speak to commanders and soldiers about life as a lone soldier, what they should expect, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the other benefits here, as you can see, the Arnona discount is actually a property tax discount. In Israel, you have to pay property tax on top of a variety of other taxes, but lone soldiers or soldiers in general do not have to pay property tax. The other two here, the Mishrad Binui and Mishrad Klita, the reason they're in red is they are specifically for lone soldiers who made Aliyah. So if you go through Machal, you're not eligible, but these are two separate payments, one from the Ministry of Housing for 400 shekels a month, and another from the Ministry of Immigration and Absorption for 540 shekels a month. Okay, so these are another, financial benefits. But again, on our website, you can see the entire, every single rights and benefits that lone soldiers have. Also, you can see the salary for lone soldiers. So those are both very, very important. Okay. The next thing that's very important is housing. Okay, where are you going to live when you join the army? So there's a lot of different options. Some people who join Garin Sabar, they're obviously going to live on a kibbutz. Even if you don't join Garin Sabar, by the way, there are many kibbutzim throughout the entire country that have different lone soldier housing units. And that's also really helpful because, again, it's all about your personality. If you're okay with kind of living far away in the countryside, then a kibbutz is a great option. It's very cheap. You also usually have an adopted family on the kibbutz who will help you with laundry and, taking care of any errands you might have. So that's a great option. Another option, the most popular option, is a rental. Okay, this is what I did in the army. I found another lone soldier. We found an apartment in Jerusalem and we rented it. Lone soldiers are given a rental subsidy from the army, specifically to pay for housing. They're giving 1,300 shekels a month, plus the 400 shekels a month from the Ministry of Housing. So that comes out to around 1,700 shekels right off the bat. And, if they put in their own 500 shekels from their IDF salary, then they could find a pretty nice apartment all throughout the country. But again, it's all about the personality. There's pros and cons with the rental. Sometimes I used to come home for the weekend and there was an empty fridge, compared to if you live with an adopted family or on a kibbutz, you know that you're going to be taken care of. Another option is the Beit HaChayal. This is more considered, I would say, an army hostel or an army motel. It's more of like barracks. There could be 8 people to a room, but it's a really great option. For example, if you're in the north and you miss the bus, you shouldn't have to pay for a hotel. So there's Beit HaChayals, which basically means a soldier house, all throughout the country, and lone soldiers do not have to pay. Again, this is not a long-term solution. Sometimes we see people in situations where they can't afford anything else and they live in a Beit HaChayal. It's more for like, your apartment lease, you have a 1 month in between. You don't want to have to sublet, so you put your stuff in a Beit HaChayal, and then a month later you move into your new apartment. Another option is the Dirat Allah. Okay, these are, it stands for Aguda L'Man HaChayal. These are specifically IDF issued apartments all throughout the country. They're amazing opportunities. You don't have to pay for anything. They help stock you with food. You live with other lone soldiers, and this is done through the army. Okay, so this is not something that you can take care of before you draft. It has to be once you draft into the army, you can try and live in a Dirat Allah. And then another option is an adopted family. Again, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of families in Israel who want to adopt the lone soldiers. Obviously not officially or legally, but they just want to have a lone soldier. They want to do their laundry. They want to feed them a Shabbat meal. They want to drop them off at the bus stop. And again, it's a really great option. But again, it's very much personality. So I was 23. I already lived out of my house for 5 years. I didn't want to go live in another person's house. But sometimes 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds who don't really have so much life experience, who never actually lived on their own, an adopted family is a really, really great opportunity. Okay. So that's a little bit about the different housing options. So again, this is a salary. It's give or take. As I mentioned, this is including the rental assistance. Okay. Something that I have to note here is that somebody might say, hey, I'm going to join a combat unit. I'm going to be making 4,800 shekels a month. When you first draft into the army, Michve Alon is not considered a combat unit because you're not in a combat unit. It's actually considered non-combat. Okay. So every soldier, no matter where they start off in the army, starts off in a non-combat. And even if you draft to a combat unit, only around 4 or 5 months in are you actually at a high enough rank to be considered a combat soldier. So it's just important to keep in mind that you're not going to start the army, even in a combat unit, instantly making 4,800 shekels, okay? As we see here, the 2 payments from the Mishrad Klita and the Mishrad Binui, okay? So these are also, important things to take into consideration. And again, this is all in our Lone Soldier information packet that's found on our website. So I'd be happy to share that with you as well. Okay, so again, this is the email that I've been talking about. This is Sarah's number. This is my number. Now I'm going to open up to some questions. I know Sarah's been answering them very diligently, but if you don't mind, you could feel free to write some of the questions you have now. And so we'll see here. So I see somebody just asking about they want to draft into the Machal unit. But again, Machal, if you go through Machal, it's only for combat or combat support. So again, because when you draft through Machal, you don't even have the security clearance to touch an IDF computer system. Therefore, it just eliminates 90% of the jobs in the Army. Because at the end of the day, the Army is 90% non-combat, 10% combat. So that's something that I would love for you to reach out, send us an email, we'll have a conversation afterwards. I see some other questions about what are the units in the IDF that a 24-year-old can join. Again, the opportunities are endless. You can join a combat unit, you can join a non-combat unit. There are hundreds of units throughout the Army. There's the Air Force, the Navy, the infantry, the police force. So there's a lot of different options. Again, I highly suggest you go on our website and also go on our website, look at the IDF job booklet. It's very extensive, but again, it's very, very helpful as well. Okay. So if you join Green Sabar, I see a question here. Do you receive the rental subsidy? You do not. Part of the Green Sabar contract is the 1,300 shekels that you're receiving is going directly to the kibbutz. So that contract that you signed for 1 year means that no matter what, no matter where you live, that 1,300 shekel rental subsidy is going to the Green Sabar housing option. I see here, what is the difference between non-combat and combat support? Combat support is anything to do where you interact with combat units. So for example, shooting instructor, Krav Maga instructor, combat driver, anything that has to do working on a combat base or working with combat units is considered combat support. Non-combat is any type of desk job or any IDF spokesperson's job, a variety of different units in that sense, but that's the main difference is combat support is actually focusing and interacting with combat units, okay? I see somebody here, can you sign on longer than 18-month service? First off, we tell people, finish your 18 months, see how you enjoy it, okay? The Army is not an easy process. Sometimes we see people after their 18 months, they're, counting their blessings that their service is over. If you do want to sign on more time, you can request it. But at the end of the day, because it's a conscription-based military and not a career-based military, the IDF does not have to accept your request. We've seen many times that soldiers are begging to stay on base, and the IDF is basically kicking them out and saying, good luck, you've done your service, now move on and contribute to society in the private sector, okay? I see your question about the qualification for joining the IDF as a lone soldier, aside from being with parents outside the country. So again, if your parents don't live in the country, you are automatically a lone soldier. If your parents do live in the country, then you are not a lone soldier, unless you fall under very special circumstances where you don't speak to your parents, you don't receive any financial support from your parents, and you would have to prove to the Army that you're a lone soldier. Again, this is more for Israelis who were either kicked out of their homes because they're ultra-Orthodox, come from, let's say they're orphans and they serve in the Army, they're considered lone soldiers, and a variety of different factors, low socioeconomic background, broken homes, and they're also considered lone soldiers, okay? Is it possible to join the Special Forces at age 24? Yeah, it's possible. It's not easy, okay? They might look at your age and say, okay, Special Forces require at least a 4-year service commitment, sometimes 3 years, sometimes 4 years, and by the time you're done, you're 27, that's too old. They might not accept you. At the same time, I have seen 24-year-olds get accepted to Special Forces units. So I always tell people, listen, anything's possible, but just go in managing your expectations. And that's also just, very important to keep into play. Do you have to pay tuition when you're in a Hesder program? This is a good question. At the end of the day, it's a service. So you're actually getting paid. You're actually getting paid. But again, sometimes the yeshiva, they make accommodations for people. And again, you're receiving money. So sometimes you actually have to pay for the Hesder program. I would always suggest if you have a specific program in mind, reach out to the Hesder yeshiva directly and start having a conversation with them. The number here under the email is our toll-free number. So you can reach out from America. But again, I highly suggest just reaching out directly to Sarah or I. We both have WhatsApp. We both have international calls. You can send us an email. We'll call you. And that's also, take it from there. Some more questions about the corona. Has that slowed it down? Not at all. The Army was actually the one place that was not really affected by the coronavirus at all, because the second the pandemic started, they completely sealed off the entire IDF. Nobody left base, nobody left the country. So there was issues that, soldiers were stuck on base for 50, 60 days at a time, which is unheard of unless it's a war type situation. But they did that in order to seal off the IDF. And in that sense, it was business as usual in the IDF. Okay. Regarding about all the possible units, again, as I mentioned, send us an email. We will send you the IDF job booklet and you can go over from there. But again, just because you find a dream unit does not mean you will get accepted to that unit. So it's important to have, a lot of different backup plans. So again, some of the challenges as an older soldier, I remember I was 23 years old. I was older than my commander. I was older than all of my officers. So that's very humbling when an 18-year-old tells you, who still lives at home, who has zero life experience, and he tells you what to do. And if you don't listen, then you're disobeying a direct command and you can get in trouble. So it's very humbling, but at the same time, it's a lot easier because I was way more mature. I had life experience. I understood what it took to be in the Army, what I've given up, what I've sacrificed. So some of the things that bothered some of the younger soldiers, they didn't even faze me, okay? I see somebody here has a specific question about Aliyah. Please send us an email. These are any of the very technical questions. I want to have a one-on-one conversation because there's not like latest or it's the earliest to make Aliyah. So that's just send us an email. Academic service 18 months. It depends. It all depends on the chart, age of arrival. If you come to Israel as a 19-year-old, you're going to have a 32-month service. If you come as a 23-year-old, then it might only be an 18-month service. So usually, again, I see a question specifically about Green Sabar. Please reach out to them directly. They have a lot of different representatives that are here to help. Sometimes they actually make you sign a full 2 years. And so if you're 23 and you go to Green Sabar, you actually, have to serve for 2 years compared to if not, you only have to serve for 12 months. So that's very important. So again, I just have to, I have to wrap it up soon. And I just want to say again, thank you for joining us this evening, this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are. I look forward to checking my emails tomorrow and seeing a plethora of emails from all of you with all of your different questions or your concerns. I see somebody here asking about Modi'in, intelligence. Almost impossible for new immigrants to make it into intelligence because you won't pass the security clearance. So it's just very difficult. But either way, use our cell phone numbers here. These are very important. And again, we're going to send you a follow-up email. You can see the recording. And again, what's the fastest way to start going? I would, send us an email first because let's decide if you're even eligible. If you don't want to just jump to Israel and then find out you're not even eligible for the Army. And yeah, again, I see somebody here has a question about visiting their son or daughter. Reach out to us. Actually, right now, they're not even allowing non-Israelis into the country. So you can't even get to Israel right now. So you got to reach out and see when they're going to be even open. Yeah, just because the borders are closed, Aliyah is taking, business as usual. People are making Aliyah next week, so the Aliyah process is not really being affected. Some of the visas are being delayed, but if you want to make Aliyah, definitely reach out to Nefesh B'Nefesh and we could help assist you. Okay. If you make Aliyah, you cannot join through Machal. Machal is only for people who don't make Aliyah, so that's very important to keep in mind. I see here somebody have an age of arrival question. Definitely that's something for an email so we can have a one-on-one conversation. And again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening, this afternoon, this morning. I look forward to, again, take a picture of this slide, send us an email, and we can go over everything. And again, thank you guys so much, and have a Shavua Tov. Yes, you could send us emails from anywhere around the world, okay? Don't worry. We will assist you anywhere and everywhere. So thank you so much again. Signing off.